Hello and welcome back to Autistic After Hours. I'm your host Ashra, and today we're going to be talking about learning to be autistic. And that sounds kind of weird or silly, but I'm going to explain what I mean by it shortly. Before we get into the episode, quick reminder to follow Autistic After Hours on Instagram. That is where I post original content every week. Also, be sure that you're following wherever you're listening to the podcast, whether that's on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube. When I say learning to be autistic, what I mean by that is that for so many later diagnosed people, or for people in general who have masked their autistic traits regardless of when they were diagnosed, sometimes when you get to a point in life where you're trying to reframe things and trying to accept and embrace your identity as an autistic person, it can feel like you are learning how to be autistic. Not that you are pretending to be autistic, not that you are trying to be autistic when you're not, but that you are trying to relearn a part of your identity that you've been so distanced from for so long. And it can feel like you literally are having to learn how to be autistic, how to be who you are, because you haven't been for so long. I think for a lot of later diagnosed people / for a lot of high masking autistic people, when you get your diagnosis or when you start embracing your identity as an autistic person, you go through this almost identity crisis of being like, okay, I have suppressed my autistic traits for so long, whether that was through conscious or unconscious processes. I have distanced myself from this part of me for so long that I don't even know if there is any world in which I can innately just exist with these traits. I don't know if I can just start embracing them, or if I can just start letting myself be autistic freely. And it's so much more than a choice. Sometimes there are so many other factors that you have to think about. For a lot of people, safety is a thing. Like, you can't just choose to let your autistic traits out, even if they come naturally to you, because of safety reasons. And for some people, it's also not a choice, because even if they wanted to embrace or fully act on their autistic traits or let them show, they've been distanced from their autistic traits for so long that it's not even an innate process anymore to, for example, stim freely or to unmask in any way. Something that frustrates me is I see in social media, particularly recently, a lot of people talking about being authentic and achieving authenticity, especially when it comes to things like content creation, like just be who you are, just be yourself, or even in things like regular life, in making friends. People always give the advice of like, oh, if you just be who you are, you'll find the right people. But for autistic people who have been masking for years, it's not a choice to just be like, oh, okay, I'm going to be me today. I'm going to be authentic today. I'm going to be 100% myself today. I'm going to be unmasked today. It's not like just a choice like that. You can't just often choose to say, oh, I'm going to unmask, because it's not just this switch that you turn on and off. Sometimes it happens without realizing it. Sometimes it's completely out of your control. And sometimes it's a safety or a defense mechanism that kicks in without you being able to inhibit it. So this idea of authenticity is bothersome to me, because even though I want to be authentic, it's not something I can just choose to be, because I don't always know what authenticity means for me. I tried for a while to think of an example or like a metaphor for what it feels like to have to relearn your autistic traits, or like relearn who you are as an autistic person. And something that kind of resonates, I think, is, let's say when you were really young, you knew a certain language, but then for years you stopped speaking that language because people told you not to, because people didn't like it when you spoke that language. And so you haven't spoken that language, you haven't used that language, you haven't connected with it in years and years and years. And now you want to start speaking it again. You want to start using that language again, and you have to relearn it, because even though you knew it at one time, the world, society, the people around you, life told you to stop speaking it, and so you disengaged from it. You didn't use it anymore. You distanced yourself from it, even if it was at some point natural to speak that language. Now it's not, and you have to relearn it. That's kind of what it feels like, for me at least. It's like when I was really little, I might have exhibited certain autistic traits, and in some way or another, society like beat them out of me, pushed them out of me. And now, as an adult, now that I know I'm autistic, I'm reconnecting with those things, and it feels like they are not natural to me anymore because I was pushed for so long to not engage with my autistic traits. And because I was masking them for so long, it feels like the innate tendency to exhibit those traits was lost, and I have to relearn them. And relearning them is difficult but very rewarding because it's like returning to what feels natural. Something I've found to be the hardest part of this entire process is reconnecting to my own ability to regulate myself. As a kid, I engaged in a lot of stimming. I was really connected to regulating myself, to kind of knowing what I needed. I had a lot of alone time as a kid because I wanted it. I rocked back and forth a lot as a kid because it helped me regulate myself. I was very sensory sensitive. I knew when something was hurting my ears. I knew when something didn't feel good on my body, and I was verbal about that, and I expressed that. And as I got older, I learned to repress. I forced myself, and people around me forced me to repress those things. And so what ended up happening is I became so disconnected from my own body, from my own instincts. I really started to doubt my own needs. I started to ignore my own needs. And it got to a point where eventually it was my instinct not to adhere to my needs, but to ignore them, to push them away, and to tell myself that they were incorrect. And it filled me with so much self-doubt, and it affected so many things. It affected my relationship with myself, but also with other people. I let people walk all over me. I was such a people pleaser because anytime someone wanted something from me, I immediately trusted them more than I trusted my own instinct, even if my own gut was telling me no. I repressed that / didn't even feel that instinct or that gut reaction anymore because I had disconnected myself from my own instincts, from my own needs. And it affected so many areas of my life. As an autistic person with sensory issues, it has not been easy for me to explore sex and intimacy in my life. I often felt like I was ignoring my own needs or just didn't have the words or the ability to communicate what my needs were and how to recognize those things in the moment. And anytime I've tried to look for support for things like sex and intimacy in my own life, I felt like the things that I found weren't affirming or they weren't meant to be educational. Until I found a platform called Beducated. Beducated is an online space with over 150 courses on all things sex and intimacy, and there is so much variety. There are courses on things like self-pleasure, consent, kink, and so much more. So this Black Friday, instead of buying more, you can invest in your sex life by signing up to Beducated, and be sure to use my code Ashra69 to get 65% off the yearly pass, which is Beducated's biggest discount of the year. And there's a 14-day money-back guarantee, so it's risk-free just in case it isn't for you. That's code Ashra69 for 65% off your yearly pass to Beducated. The link is in the show notes. Reconnecting with that has been so difficult, and part of why it's difficult is because the actual act of it is hard to do. It's hard to retrain yourself to trust yourself and to actually feel what your body needs. It's a really hard thing to do that. But it's also hard because I have so much frustration and anger toward the fact that I had these instincts. I did show autistic traits as a kid. I was very intuitive with what I needed, and it was forced out of me. And it's so frustrating that at a time I knew myself so well, but because of the people around me and because of society, I was forced to stop. I was forced to not regulate myself anymore, to stop being the way that I was, to replace and swap out all of my innate instincts and behaviors for ones that were more societally expected and successful. And it left me feeling so empty, so numb, so disconnected from myself, and so much trauma has been incurred because of it, and it's so upsetting, and there are so many feelings of frustration and anger and guilt about it all, because I know that at a time I knew who I was, and because of the way that I was treated, I was forced to disconnect from my truth, and that is so upsetting. And so part of why all of this is difficult is because the actual act of it is difficult. It's really hard to reconnect with yourself after you've been so disconnected. But it's also difficult because of the heavy and big emotions that come with it, the anger, the frustration, the sadness, the guilt. It wasn't you who chose to disconnect from yourself. It was the things and the systems and the people around you that forced you to. But yet you're the one responsible for fixing it, and that is so frustrating. Unmasking is really hard because it feels really awkward at times too. Even when I'm by myself, I find myself monitoring everything that I do. I feel so narrative of my own experience that it feels meta. It feels that I'm like narrating my life rather than living it at times, even when I'm alone. And this has gotten a lot better as I've been unmasking, but it takes so long to get here. It takes so long to get rid of that instinct to like self-monitor and to be so aware of yourself because you've been taught to be and you've been forced to be. A lot of autistic people describe this feeling as feeling like there's hidden cameras around. And so like even when you're alone, you have to be monitoring yourself. You have to be aware of yourself because it feels like you're being watched. And it's like this paranoia that comes from years of trauma of being forced to hide yourself. And it feels like even when you're alone, you're not safe to be who you are. I've realized that things like acceptance, authenticity, and relearning who you are kind of means having to redefine like all aspects of your life, redefining what friendships look like for you, redefining what level of alone time you need, redefining what productivity means for you, redefining your stress, redefining the ways that you understand your body, the ways that you accommodate for yourself, the way that you show up in relationships, the amount of work you're able to do in a day, the amount of things that you can include on your to-do list, redefining all of these things because it is such a central aspect, a central core of identity, at least for me. And so learning that I'm autistic and learning how to be autistic myself, learning how to be who I am, reconnecting with who I was before I started hiding everything, it means having to adjust and reframe and look at everything in a new way. And it is a process because of that. It's a journey and it takes time and it takes a lot of grace, and you have to be really nice to yourself and you have to be really warm and open with yourself because it can be really easy to close off and to isolate and hide yourself away from everything because of how overwhelming it gets. All of this is an effort to, for me, return back home. It feels like creating my body as my home again because for so long I didn't feel safe inside of my own body because of how neglected I was, because of how neglected my autistic traits were, because of how much I was distancing myself from my own self, from my own needs, disconnecting from myself, dissociating, doing whatever I could to hide who I was because I wasn't allowed to be me. And now that I am allowed to be me and that I'm making the choice to be who I am and figure all of this out, it feels like I'm creating a safety inside of myself again, something that I didn't have for a very long time, maybe never. And it feels like returning home, returning to an alignment, returning to authenticity. And it's not a easy process. And a lot of times it's not a pretty process. It's like heavy and awkward. And sometimes I find things out or learn things about myself that I wish weren't true or that I wish I could get rid of, but I can't. And trying to get rid of things, trying to suppress who I am, it's not worth it. It's never been worth it. And that is why I'm doing it. And it's hard. And if you're doing it too, you're not alone. And that's pretty much all I have for you today. I ultimately just want you to know that it feels really awkward and weird to say that you're learning to be autistic, but for a lot of us, that is the reality of the situation, is that we were hiding our autistic traits, whether subconsciously or consciously, for so long that we've disconnected from them. And even if you are autistic, sometimes when you figure that out, you have to relearn how to be autistic, how to be who you are, because you haven't been for so long. And it's valid to feel that way, and you're not alone. And I want to thank you so much for being here today and for listening. As always, remember, autistic adults exist. We deserve awareness, support, community, and acceptance. And I'm so grateful that you're here. And I'll talk to you again soon. Bye.